Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And well, I've not been playing that much EVE Online in the last week. I have been doing pretty well on the exploration front with some pretty massive drops coming from the Sanchez sites near Dital. So I must say, even though I didn't spend that much time in EVE Online, I did make quite a bit of ISK just doing my exploration. It's still by far my favorite activity in EVE Online at the moment. Now something is happening that was completely under my radar, and that is that EVE Down Under is happening right now. So if you want to know more about what's happening in EVE, definitely head over to Reddit, where some people are posting like keynote pictures and things like that. Very interesting so far, in my opinion. The potential structure development that's happening at the moment, propaganda towers, and something called small stargates. It's gonna be like the jump bridges that we know now, but the potential implications there are huge, of course. So yeah, more structures on the horizon, and I myself would love to get my hands on some propaganda towers. Also some stats for Into the Abyss. I myself, I must say, I think I run Abyssal sites maybe like one session a week or so. I jump in my Gila, do some tier 1, tier 2s, and then go back to explore. So it's usually on an evening where I run an exploration round and I find absolutely nothing good. Then I'm assuming that there's more people doing exploration at that time, so I switch over to some Abyssal sites, and it's usually like once a week that I do that. Those are my stats for Into the Abyss. And of course the Gila is like by far the most popular ship when it comes to running Abyssal sites. It's just so good in PvE, in the cruiser sized content in EVE Online. I don't think you can get better than the Gila at the moment. So look out for the nerf pad though. If CCP wants to strike there, that might happen. Something to keep in mind as well. But let's move on. We are here for the market, of course, and as always we are going to start with some plex and stuff. It's going to be at 220. Like that. Let's start with plex, which are hesitating at this point, I would say. On the chart you can definitely see that we're back up to around 2.9 million on the chart. In JITA itself we are also 2.9 million for one order, but then we pretty quickly head to 3 million or just below that. There's still a decent volume here, but we are seeing that upwards pressure come back. On the other hand, we have a stop to that increase in price because CCP came out with yet another sale. So it's been lots of sales. I got an email, another 15% off or something like that. And as a result, at the moment, plex are still below 2.9 million in the player-owned trade hubs if you're looking to buy them. It's actually pretty important to note because I personally think that for the longer term these are pretty good investments. It's also plex below 1.5 billion for the 500 for the 30 days game time. So I would say that you can still try to grab your cheap plex, try to grab that investment, especially if you have the patience of putting up a buy order between these two, right, to 850, something like that. Considering that on the entire chart here, we're obviously at the low point for the entire year. So plex to me is looking like it is still in a very good place for buying, and that is of course due to CCP still coming out with more sales and things like that. Let's move on to the multiple pilot trading certificate then. Same hesitation here, heading back to just below a billion ISK on the chart. 1 billion ISK for the sellers and 977 million ISK for the buyers. So very narrow margin. That's definitely narrowed since our volatility has decreased from this leg down and then this leg up. This is a little bit smaller, so the margin is smaller as well, but you're buying them for a billion. And if you look at the entire chart, 1.4, 1.5 billion at the high point, definitely possible. Take a look at when that's happening as well. October, November, before the expansion and the I think it was the introduction of the refineries. So who knows, if CCP comes out with some interesting structure stuff for next winter, then all of these might be in a great place to start your investments in. Next up, we'll take a look at the skill extractor. That shouldn't be anything too special. We have a mirror of the plex basically. with a bottom here at around 320 million ISK. We're back above 330 on the chart for sure, 324 for the sellers, 323 for the buyers. Again, very narrow margin, so the market is saying we are not really going to go much lower here. If you still want that investment, again, I think this is the time to do so. Next up we have the large scale injector continuing the downtrend. Last week I said I didn't quite understand where this came from, but I felt like this was a nice opportunity to try and grab some cheap ones. Someone said I was wrong, never gave an explanation. So if you have an actual explanation as to why we have this very sharp drop off here all of a sudden for the large scale injectors, I think I said that it's finally plex that have gone down in price substantially as well over the last few months. That is that is being calculated through here, and we have this, but it doesn't explain this super sharp, this super fast drop off, and I honestly don't really know what's behind it. So yeah, even more pressure, selling now for 745 million, bars coming in at 736.5. If you have the explanation, feel free to post that in the comments. I'm in the dark. If I look at this entire chart, we're back at a 1-year low point. I would say that you could definitely consider buying some of these, at least a portion of the price of skill injectors. Of course, the extractor and the plex, we know that these are down in price, so potential general inflation should mean upwards pressure for skill injectors at some point. Now, maybe not for the short term or anything like that, but if you have this kind of a drop off and you know that plex is part of this item, I would personally say that this is actually investment worthy, but I may be wrong. If you know the exact reason for this drop off in a month from 800 million down to less than 750, please share it with us. I would love to know. The small skill injector next is also showing that same drop off. Bit of hesitation, tried to go back to 160, but the market is saying nope, 151 for the sellers and 143 for the buyers. So that's pretty obviously also coming close to a low point here, and couldn't tell you exactly what's behind it. The daily alpha injectors under pressure as well, but slowly trying to go back in the last couple of days towards 55 million. ISK. Sellers are up to 54 million, buyers are at 51. These are a bit different, of course. For the skill injectors, you need to buy skill extractors, which you buy through plex, and then you need to put in the skill points in order to create the injectors. For the daily alpha injector, you just buy those straight from the store. They are, of course, also only used by alpha clones, so it's a bit different here, and we are basically seeing the sale impact on these daily alpha injectors. Moving on to some minerals at 745. I think if you saw the ticker that this is the ticker already, that this is not good news. Here is titanium broken. We are below 5 ISK, and we are below 5 ISK for the 5-day moving average and the 20-day moving average. It's not looking too good here. The pressure is on. It's summer, guys. There's not much that we can do about that. If we take a look at JITA, 492 for the sellers, 474 for the buyers, and despite the fact that last week I think we still had sellers above 5 ISK, look at what comes in here. 2 billion at 5, a billion at 499. 497 you get a 1.5 billion, then another 2, another 1.8, another 2. So this is just the oversupply that's happening at the moment, and there's really nothing you can do about that except ride this out and maybe try to time the bottom if you're looking to take make an investment and to try to take advantage of what's happening at the moment. I personally do think that a big part of this is the summer slump. In EVE Online there is lower activity, there's definitely lower destruction, but the miners of EVE generally, in my opinion, tend to be the guys that do stick around. They don't need the PvP action to be there all the time in order to enjoy the game, and as a result I think you've got a sharper decline of destruction than you've got a decline of production of minerals at the moment. Pyrite was already at a 1-year low and is basically staying below 4 ISK at the moment. 406 for the sellers, 380 for the buyers. Here again you can see the billions of units flowing in that are continuing the pressure. 1-year low point. Titanium is not yet at a 1-year low point, but you can clearly see that the pressure is on there. Let's take a look at Mexilon. Yeah, we're continuing with the bad news. Last week we managed to come back above 70 ISK, which is still a good price, a decent price for Mexilon. but it is inevitable. At this point we are going back down. 67.8 for the sellers, 64 ISK for the buyers. Yeah, below 70 ISK I would start to hesitate at this point. You can clearly see that 70 is around the average, maybe even at the lower end of the average if you look at the high points and the low points, but the fact that we are now below that point, I would say you could consider not selling your Mixelon to the market anymore and hope for better times, hope for Nullsec destruction, which would of course mean a need for Mixelon if they want to replace their losses there. That's the bottleneck mineral in Nullsec, and so potentially the easiest investment in my opinion would be to try and time a bottom for Mixelon. Just keep a close eye on that, see how low we go for the buyers, and know that, well, above 70 ISK is an okay price, but 75 to 80 ISK when Nullsec demands its Mixelon is definitely a possibility. And so this one feels like it's going to be the easier one to try and make some ISK on. Something like Pyrite has just been going straight down for 10 months. I think you can do it, but you need that very long horizon, and you need basically that CCP intervention to change the state of this market. We've got Isogen next. That's in the same boat as Pyrite, of course. 1 year low point is basically hovering at the current extremely low price of 27.3 for the sellers and 26.7 for the buyers. Minerals, obviously most of them at 1 year low point, and the only two ones that have been able to hang on to historical prices, Mixelon and Tritanium, are under pressure as well. When we take a look at Noxium, that's not going to be pretty. Yeah, we saw that it had some momentum to break through 300 last week, and as I've said, when that happens, when a previously defended price gets broken in such a way that we have this volatility here, it's really not looking too good. So we have even more supply coming in. Yeah, you can still see 45 million here, 25 million here. Sellers are down to 274 ISK, the buyers are at 257. We are now way below 300 ISK, which has been defended successfully 1, 2, 3, 4 times in the last 6 to 8 months here, but it just wasn't meant to be now. With, as I've said, in my opinion, the summer activity, the summer time in EVE Online, this has been broken right here early June, and that means that we are going to probably start moving in this new price band for the foreseeable future. 250 to 300 I think will be the goal if we don't go even lower. 273, yeah, I think 250 can still be defended by the market at this point. If we would ever get past that, ouch, that would really hurt, I think. For the formerly known as Nullsec minerals, Zydrine and Megasite, we can see even more bad news on that front as well. Zydrine dropping well below 600 ISK at this point, 561 for the sellers, 518 for the buyers. Extremely cheap. We can again see the 1 year declining price, pretty much 10 months straight of declining prices. Now for these Nullsec minerals, it is of course something completely different that has caused this, whereas Pyrite and Isogen have basically become massively oversupplied for the production needs of the game in general. Zydrine and Megasite have of course been introduced to HiSec and remote space in much more abundant numbers through the new moon mining mechanics and the refineries there, and the impact of that has been absolutely huge. 1000 to 1100 ISK was actually already a pretty good price for Zydrine, and now we've cut that price in half again over the last 10 months. This does mean very cheap Tech 1 chips, but this also means that your efficiency as a miner has taken quite a nosedive. Here is Megasite next. Manages to hold on to a price above 600, I think. Yeah, 606, only just here. 609 for the sellers, 601 for the first buyer of Megasite. So while Zydrine has basically broken through the 600 ISK barrier and is now looking for that new band to move into, which is probably going to be again like 550 to 600, maybe even 500 to 600. Megasite for now has been able to maintain the 600 ISK price mark, but we're only at the start of the summer, so personally I wouldn't see this as an opportunity to grab your Megasite just yet. If I would be investing in any of these minerals, I think I would maybe grab a little bit of Zydrine on this way down because it is quite volatile. But even then, it's still too early. You can see the trends that have been set, and I don't see that big of a reason for this to change right now, especially if I look at the EVE Down Under information. New structure, that should actually mean more PI stuff, not necessarily more minerals, unless CCP decides that there's this new class they were talking about, small structures that would be very fast to deploy but also very easy to destroy. Not even dockable, I think, so really a completely different category of structures. If they would switch that from PI to minerals, perhaps there is that could be a way for CCP to try to stem the bleeding here. Let's move on to that PI then. That's gonna be at 1525. Like that. Let's get started here. Broadcast nodes. Ooh, that is pretty good in my opinion at a pretty low point here, but be careful. Does this increased volume just 2 days ago mean that we are already on our way back up? Let's take a quick look at this average price here. 2.1 million. Sellers coming in at 2.3, buyers at 2.1, a little bit above that. So we are already on our way back up here. I think this could be EVE Down Under. If you still want to make those advanced PI material investments, you gotta start to hurry, because CCP is actually sharing concrete information on their next roadmap, and with small stargates, yeah, some small stargates, and of course propaganda towers on there. I mean, some people will probably go pretty nuts for propaganda towers. I know that if it's doable, I'll definitely do that as well. I hope that you can like deploy them around your structures. I think that would be what makes most sense. Yeah, potentially, of course, a very big demand for these advanced PI materials, if that's planned for, let's say, the winter release expansion. Who knows what CCP is planning to do there. Construction blocks next. Back at 12k, back on the average price after a couple of good increases last month. 12,100 for the sellers, 11,400 for the buyers. Right back on the average, so you can still sell, but I would say have the patience for a sell order if you do that. Consumer electronics dropping off, managing to maintain 14,000 ISK for about 6 months. Not bad, is now dropping off quite sharply. 13,400 for the sellers, 12,200 for the buyers. Very sharp drop off here all of a sudden. This is definitely, it really depends here on how you're reading this chart. You can see maybe 13k as the average if we take this slump here as being a part of the normal price activity of consumer electronics, or you can disregard that and say 14k is probably the average, and this would be a great buy opportunity. You could really go either way personally, because this drop off here did last 2 months, but basically that's all it is. It feels a lot like an anomaly on this entire chart, and so this feels like pretty sharp drop off, maybe too much increased supply all of a sudden, and potentially a buy opportunity to me. Next up, we've got the coolants. After reaching 10k, comes back under pressure a little bit. Obviously, all of a sudden people could finally dump some coolants, try to get 10k for that. You've got the volume increase all of a sudden, which means that, well, sellers holding on 10,100, buyers at 9,100 as well. It's basically a gap that's opening up between sellers and buyers here. So that dumping, this increased volume, must have been people going straight to the buyers, actually saying, well, you know, 9,200, 9,300, that's great, I'll just get rid of that coolant, and we'll all of a sudden sell twice the average on a single day, increasing the margin, not dumping them on the sell orders, but actually just filling up buy orders here. Very interesting situation. If the sellers have the patience, we might actually see this come back up to 10k on the chart again as well. Enriched uranium, 11,000. Not much to say here. After a very volatile period in the first half of the year, we're back on a much more stable enriched uranium market. 11,000 for the sellers, practically 11,000 for the buyers as well. Super stable. Not really sure. I would say, yeah, just sell it if you're producing it at the moment, or hoard it. You could really go either way. The integrity response drones next. After increasing in price a little bit to 2.7 million. Apparently back down in the last few days, but not by much. 2.7 for the sellers, 2.6 for the buyers. In my opinion, still relatively expensive. We never really seem to be getting that massive break, that clear opportunity in advanced PM materials, and especially in the integrity response rows. The mechanical parts staying above 10k, came back under pressure after reaching 11,000 ISK. The volumes aren't doing anything too crazy, so for now sellers are at 11,000 ISK, buyers are at 10,000 ISK, and the price is hovering in that price band, which if you look at this entire chart is not bad. Definitely a bit of a comeback after the slump with moon mining and the basically the destruction of the bosses on moons for moon mining, which meant a massive decrease in demand for fuel and a massive decrease in demand for these types of PM materials. We have this comeback, and for now mechanical parts 10,000 to 11,000 ISK is actually a historically normal price for this good. So overall I think that we are back in a healthier fuel consumption position in EVE Online. Next up, we've got the nuclear reactors slowly edging back up here. Let's see what the sellers are at. 91,600, 84,000 for the buyers. I made an investment of that. I bought a couple thousand nuclear reactors myself. I think around this area here. I think you can very easily expect at some point that you'll be able to sell this for 100 to 120,000 is pretty easily. So this is one of those that I do have in the cargo bay of my main at the moment, some cheap nuclear reactors. We'll see if we can make this trade work, but I fully expect that we can if you look at this entire chart again. Next up, organic mortar applicators. Due to popular demand, I brought this into the PI segment as well. It's been asked several times before, but now we had a small conversation in the comment section, and why the hell not? It's only one good. I can't add everything. EVE Talk would start to take like 12 hours or something like that if we would take a look at everything. But organic mortar applicators, it's an advanced PI material. It's definitely tied to structures again. And so if you want like another one that potentially I would look for investment opportunities, and you can see here like probably 6 days ago 1 million, playing with 1 million here as well. Let's see what the sellers and buyers are doing. 1,150,000 for the sellers, a bit above 1 million for the buyers, and just look at the spikes when new structures comes out. So yeah, just wait for that chart to hit 1 million. I think you'll find buy orders below 1 million at that point. Try to grab them that way. I think you can find the investments, but you need to keep a close eye on the market. You need to time everything right. Last year I, for instance, was fully expecting this to happen in August, September, and I was too late. Basically, I was too late to the party to make those trades when it comes to moon mining. So this time, maybe you should be a little bit earlier, and you should already start to slowly stock up on that, and then just try to go a little bit bigger when you do spot that real buy opportunity. That's potential tactic as well, of course. Robotics holding strong at above 100,000 ISK. So first seller coming in 99,000, it's only one of them. So let's say 103 for the sellers, 96,000 for the buyers. Again, here the slump with the ending of bosses on moons, which definitely declined our fuel consumption. Robotics came back very quickly to 100,000 ISK, which is it was definitely below average from everything that happened before, but it's a normal price for robotics, and we've basically been staying at that price range in the last couple of months. Self-harmonizing power cores under pressure. Today's daily average very close to 2 million. That looks quite interesting. Yeah, 2 million for the sellers, 2 million, a little bit less than 2.1 million for the buyers. I like this. I like this. If you can grab them very close to 2 million, you're basically below the entire chart. And then on propaganda towers, on stargates, on anything needing more of these advanced PI materials, you potentially have a good trade. I like this data point. I like where the chart is heading. This is definitely one of those where I would put a buy order between those two, try and grab a couple, and then just don't go too crazy. Don't spend all your money right now, but to slowly start to build up that investment, I think makes a lot of sense. Superconductors next, actually under pressure as well a little bit, selling now for 11,500, 11,000 for the buyers. Let's see here. I would say again below average price, but Also considering that we've been in this price range for several months before, seems to be happening now again. It is summertime. Yeah, if you still want to sell, I'd say again, just be patient, put up a sell order so that you get at least the 11,000 plus ISK out of your sell order. But I wouldn't hold it against you if you decide to start to hoard at this point and wait for the sell opportunities to come back here. Test cultures next, bouncing off 8,700, something like that, probably 9,100 for the sellers, 8,700 for the buyers. Still not in clear buy order territory in my opinion. You can see from this spike here that it is tied to the production of advanced PI materials and thus to the structure releases. So you do have an opportunity there if you can spot the right one. This is a trade that I've made. It was on the deployment of, God, what was it? I think the engineering complexes, where we went well below 7,500 as well. I managed to grab some really cheap test cultures, had to hold on to them for quite a while, but then when the engineering complexes came out, I did make a sale. I think I had like 50% profit, 60% profit, something like that. So test cultures is also one of those that if you want a smaller investment, not the millions you need for the broadcast nodes, you can look into this refined PI material and tie it to structures. But for me personally, the chart doesn't look too good yet. I want to see a chart close to 7,500, buy orders below that. That's when I would make my move on test cultures. And then finally, we've got the wetware mainframes after a very nice dip to like 2.2 million. That was a nice opportunity. We went back up a little bit to 2.5, but look at the pressure that is back on here as well. 2.25 million for the sellers, 2.22 million for the buyers. If you look at the entire chart here, it's definitely at the low end. Wetware mainframes and no, it's not organic mortar applicators. It's the self-harmonizing power cores. In my opinion, if you want to get started on those investments, those two look to be in the right place. Next up, we have our Tech 1 chips at 2620. There we go. And let's take a look at these. Now, that's probably just like in the last couple of weeks. We won't see too much special, I don't think, unless we have like a NOSIC fleet being bought. But I think even there, Tech 1 chips are not in the meta. So here is the Apocalypse, a little bit of a bounce up from 130 million to on average 100 and, well, it still says 130. It's 140 for the sellers, 128 for the buyers. On the entire chart here, we are obviously below the normal average. A little bit of a bounce back, quite unexpected, but just look at the volumes as well here. Like 10 a day, maybe something like that, even less than that. So just a couple of sales can have an influence on the price, but it will always get stalled quite quickly, I think, because of how cheaply we can make everything at the moment. Caracal continuing the decline here, so that one is obviously well below average, selling for 8.5 million. Buyers are at 7.9 million for a Caracal, super cheap, and it's actually a really nice Tech 1 cruiser. It can't compete with something like the Gila, it can't compete with the Tech 2 cruiser or anything like that, but it's a very nice cruiser with shields, missiles, makes a lot of sense. And to see this one dip to such low prices does, in my opinion, show the impact of the lack of destruction at the moment and the super availability of minerals. The Catalyst is actually holding on quite nicely, 1.1 million for the sellers and more than 1 million for the buyers. Bit of an anomaly. It is also a ganking ship that sometimes knows some pretty crazy volumes all of a sudden. The Drake, the battle cruisers are, I think, in my opinion, showing the mineral impact the best. They did so last week as well. All of them were a bit more under pressure. And here is the Drake falling to, well, a one-year low point if we disregard the arms race event, and even then we're coming into that range. Are we really breaking 40 million? Yes, 39 million for a Drake. That's crazy. Battle cruiser, you know, I used to know Myrmidon 60, 70 million, something like that. Now you get a Drake for 39 million. ISK, buyers at 36.6. Really slow, really very cheap at the moment. The Ferox, same thing, just breaking through the 40 million barrier. 40.2 million for the sellers, but 36.5 again for the buyers, and the averages play below that because, well, sometimes people say, what the hell, I'm probably still making a little bit of risk even on that buy order, so let's just dump it. Megatron, same picture, you can see the decline in the last few months quite nicely. Not yet at the arms race bottom, but selling for 138, buyers at 129, very cheap as well. The Oracle, again the battlecruiser, look at that, just now trying to find a price range of around 60 million ISK below everything else. 1 year low point, 61.5 for the sellers, 56.1 for the buyers of Oracles, so that is quite low as well. The Raven doing a little bit better than most battleships here, managing to command 141 million for the sellers and 136 for the buyers. It is still relatively cheap, of course. Then we've got the Retriever after a little bit of a comeback, and I'm not sure why that was. We are back on the 1 year low point range, 19 million for the sellers, basically a bit of dumping happening here with some big numbers, and 17.9 million for the buyers. We've got the Tempest next, also starting to play with that arms race bottom, selling for 138, buyers at 116 million for the buyers of battleships. Crazy low. The Thrasher continuing its descent towards 900,000 ISK as well. 900,000 for the sellers, 860 for the buyers. You can see on the charts basically how the minerals have been impacting the prices of Tech 1 ships, and especially in the battle cruisers. This is coming out front and center. Here is the Tornado 1 year low point as well. 51 million for the sellers, 47 million for the buyers. That makes for a very cheap ganking battle cruiser. The Tristan staying below 500,000 ISK. There's not much to say on this one. The Venture also finally feeling the pressure here, heading towards 200,000 ISK. Still at 250 for the sellers, but the buyers at 205. They want to drag that price down. And then the Vexor, also 1 year low point. That is to be expected on these mineral prices. 8.5 million for the sellers, 8.2 million for the buyers. It's, you know, in the same boat as the Caracal. Super cheap for a actually very good Tech 1 cruiser. This again, in my opinion, you know, it strengthens my desire for an Abyssal variant that is Tech 1 only and that is PvP focused. I think that could be very interesting. It would take away from the sandbox a little bit, right? You're basically talking PvP instances, but considering the current prices here, I think it could make for a very nice like practice area where people would participate and feel like they don't have to risk anything too expensive because they can't, and where they can you know, expect a somewhat more fair fight, where they can actually learn something from every encounter, whereas, you know, taking a Tech 1 ship into low sec at this point is basically a rather useless endeavor, unless maybe you go for a battleship, but even then, you know, it's just a completely different. It's one of the reasons why at the moment I'm not really interested in PvP, because, you know, doing it in Tech 1 ships, I know it's a sandbox, I know it's its nature, but it doesn't feel like that's even something that I should do, because they are so super cheap at the moment and completely out of the meta. You'll always be outclassed by whatever is actually flying out there at the moment. Next up, Tech 2 ships at 3240. Let's get started on these. Now, Tech 2 is a little bit different, of course. There is also some rebalancing news that I saw. Already forgot which ships they are, but keep that in mind as well. From Eve Down Under, they are rebalancing some ships. Here is the Ares. Now we're gonna go over this one pretty quickly. I'll look for buy opportunities and we'll see if there are sell opportunities. The Ares still well above 30 million, so that's a big no for me. The Cerberus staying above 280 million, maybe. The way I look at this, I know on CC that there's definite signs of even more events, which is one of the most popular ships next to the Gila for these events is the Cerberus. You're landing at 280. Look at the previous spikes, which can often be tied to events. Potentially this is okay. It does feel risky considering the entire chart, but Cerberus buyers at 268. Maybe you could try that. Try and grab one at 270 and hope that you know, take 2 cruisers, and cruisers are the best choice again for the next event. You might actually have a potential trade here for the Cerberus. The Claw is now landing at 30 million. Buyers are landing at 27.8 million, but if I'm not mistaken, the Claw is getting nerfed, so I'd love to see this be way lower before I'd say that that's a buy opportunity. The Crow is dropping off, but staying well above 30 million, so in my opinion still too early with buyers at 30. The Crusader is also hesitating, but still staying above 30 million, so that's again a no. The Heretic Interdictor is staying well above the entire charts and at more than 80 million. You know, that's a big no. The Hound is breaking 30 million on the downtrend. We saw 26.5 as the lowest data point recently, and we're buying them at 26 million. You can see that there's a lack of buyers. Stealth bombers on nullsec activity, right? Some a bomber's bar mission going bad. These do go up quite sharply into nice spikes. Yeah, the Hound for me, that's one that I would risk. Try and grab him as close to 26 million as possible. You're below the entire chart here. Yeah, Hound looks very interesting in my opinion. The Ishtar next, dropping off to 250 million ISK. Again, same thing. Ishtar actually not bad for the events. Also a pretty good raiding ship. To see this one drop off to 250 like that, 251 for the buyers. Maybe, if you're really looking for that Tech 2 investment, this could actually be quite good. This is a very nice drop off back on an average that that has only started here. That actually goes back all the way to September. So not bad for the Ishtar. The Manticore next, actually going back up to 35 million ISK and above. So that's a big no for me. Maybe even a small sell opportunity close to 38. Nemesis still well above 30, so that's a no. Pontifex basically stable at this price range. I wouldn't. Purifier next, trying to drop off right after reaching another high point, 42.8 million on the chart on an average day here, falling off, but you know, nowhere near 30 million, so that's a big no for me. The Raptor, again, nowhere near 30 million, so nope, no thank you. Saber, just nope, don't like it. Man, we can go pretty quickly in this. The Stiletto, again, look at that landing here. I don't think you're gonna really get any trades out of it. It feels too risky at this point, right before the summer, to say I'm going to try and grab some Stilettos at 30 million and I'm gonna hope for another spike at 40 million here. It doesn't make too much sense for me. Next up, we've got the Stork. That is a bit more interesting, obviously dropping off lower than it's been in quite a while. 75 million for the sellers, but 60.1 million for the buyers. 60.7 million, so you can grab these for like 61, 62 million. That's in this range right here. Look at what happened to the previous drop to this price range. We got a nice opportunity to all of a sudden sell them for more than 100 million. So yeah, the Stork is quite sharply dropping off as well. Could be quite interesting. And then finally we've got the Taranis that is also breaking 30 million. Where are the buyers at? 26.7, so let's say 27 million around here on the chart. Might be a bit too early. That is, if you really have ISK to burn, you might consider the Taranis as well. I would say it's still too early, but the Hound looks interesting just because there is just not enough demand here, and we are talking well below 30 million. So on a Hound repurchase after a lost fleet, which does happen to stealth bombers, this is potentially a very nice opportunity. And chart-wise, I like the Ishtar, kind of like the Cerberus from the event perspective, and then the Stork, that's quite a sharp drop-off as well. It's quite an investment, of course. You know, you're gambling on 60-70 million. You are talking about a ship with very low volumes, but perhaps one of them, it could make sense. So yeah, Tech 2 ships, it's still very tricky to gauge that market. Next up, we have the Tech 3 market at 38 minutes. Like that, and let's take a look at what's happening here. The Confessor dropping off towards less than 35 million on average, sometimes 34 million for the sellers, 227. Very, very interesting. Not good news for people like myself that have just bought a couple of Confessors. Buyers coming in at 34 million, but you know, you always need a longer horizon when you're trading in this situation. But I was saying last week and in the last couple of weeks, that oversupply specter is still a threat. And we've been here before when it comes to Tech 3 ships, where for a very long sustained period we were way oversupplied, and despite the fact that we already had low prices, which I would say is this period, we came in and brought it down even more. And you know, it is the summer. I don't see that much destruction happening, but I do see Wormhole Space farming up a storm, trying to bring even more production online, and as a result you do have Confessors 227 coming in at 34 million ISK. Very cheap, very close to the sell orders. Look at that increased supply last week. We were talking these types of orders, dozens, sometimes one in the 20s, but to see 227 here does show that oversupply is a potential threat. We could go even lower, so don't go crazy when it comes to buying. And the volumes here is the Hecate. Is that a Hecate dump? No, not really that visible. 38 million for the sellers, 35.7 for the buyers, 44 here, 28, 34 here. Not too crazy, so that one volume increase here is a little bit weird. Maybe I should look at the player-owned trade hubs. Definitely not on the sellers. So, okay, interesting. Weird volume increase here all of a sudden, but what I do see here is that it's still quite available, very cheap. Potentially oversupply is still possible. I think the Jackdaw staying at its current 37.5 range, but look at that, 161 coming in at 36 million. That's going to put more pressure on them. Buyers are at 36 million. Look out for that, definitely look out for that. Final destroyer, here is this Vapul, also showing a bit of pressure at the tail end. Why is that? Not in the hundreds, but it's already selling at 33 million for the first seller, 36 for the next one. Now we slowly go up to 40, buyers at 33 million. That's already very cheap, but this and this are not good signs. Potentially I do see even lower buy opportunities later through the summer. Now Zwepel buying at 33, that does feel really cheap, but be careful. So again, I would say don't do your entire Tech 3 Destroy investment at these prices. Can you buy some of them at these really cheap prices? Sure, but that oversupply specter is rearing its head here again. A little bit unexpected. For the last couple of weeks it really looked like we weren't going to see that, but now I'm a bit more scared than I was last week, basically, to pull the trigger on tactical destroyers. For the cruisers, I think we're still staying in Bizarro world there. You can see here the fluctuations are just so weird, so sharp. I think we're still being manipulated to hell and back. Legion went up to 200 million, slowly dropping off to 188 million, buyers at 179. This just doesn't feel like a market where I'm willing to take the dive. The Loki next, staying in the 200 to 250 million range, 224 for the sellers. So the volumes here are definitely not crazy, but that also means that you can manipulate this market. And then we've got the Proteus here, you know, like everyone agreed this was the worst chip after the Tech 3 rebalance. It remained really cheap, and then all of a sudden here we have this increase in price. It was basically a full relisting, and you can see that the volumes are nothing too crazy either, and we're now slowly going down to 170 for the sellers, 154 for the buyers. So this to me feels like such a weird market that unless we really start to break and we go back to a price, for instance, for the Tengu below 150, and the buyers are at 160, sellers at 170. Unless we really break through that average of the current playground, I would say, of the market slash investors slash manipulators, then I'm not making any moves on the cruiser market. The destroyer market does seem more interesting, but there again we do have that threat looming, in my opinion. So the Tech 3 market is quite interesting. But the Tech 3 cruiser market, I just personally feel like it's not gonna happen at this point. We want that oversupply to basically come into the cruiser market as well, so that it can't be manipulated by a couple of small players with huge relistings, which is what must have happened here, and then that we can finally see a more normal market action and an actual buy opportunity. Yeah, very interesting in my opinion, but not the right time for the cruiser market, I don't think. Next up, let's move for the extra product, which I've selected to be the faction cruisers at, goddammit, almost dropped my pen, 4340. Let's put that up here. And faction cruisers, well, we'll definitely look, faction frigates, sorry, we'll definitely take a look at the pirate factions first, just to get a feel of what's happening in the market here. So the Astero actually up in price after reaching a one-year low point of 55 million, is currently selling for an average price 60 for the sellers, 55 for the buyers. Gaining popularity a little bit all of a sudden. I'm not really sure why. Maybe the filament hunt, right? Filaments added to data and relic sites might have increased the demand for Asteros a little bit. Still nothing to worry about. It's basically the average price. And 55 to 60 million, that's not really that great of a trade. The crew are next going down in price after actually a high point of 70 million for the year. Now back down to 50 million. It's not yet a low point. Where are the buyers at though? 47 million. Yeah, if this continues, of course, you could look to grab some easy crews at 40 million. Next up, we've got the Daredevil, pretty stable on a normal average price, 65 million for the sellers and 60 million for the buyers. Then we've got the Dramiel. Ooh, that's interesting. Look at that manipulation. Or at that maybe Dramiel fleet. Oh no, of course, that's what do you want to use for the Grand Prix? Well, the fastest ship in the game, basically. These what are the Angel Cartels are basically faster warpers than always a tier up in warp capability. So their cruisers basically warp like frigates. Their frigates, well, they warp like nothing else in the game outside of the Leopard, like basically like shuttles. So that is why we have this increase in price. Makes a lot of sense, and so an investment when you could have bought these for 42 million ISK, currently still selling for 50 million ISK, 42 for the buyers. But that was a nice little you know, new event, and here is the ship that's shown in that event, the Dramiel. So lots of people bought those. Very nice little opportunity that had passed by on me, but it's in the same vein as what I was saying for the cruiser. Let's go back here very quickly. So we get the Cerberus. You know, it's landing here. If you have an event where really something you need a cruiser, but you also need some strong resistance, have lots of incoming damage, lots of people are going to jump on that Cerberus because it potentially has a better tank, I think, than the Gila, and so then you can have that same activity in the market all of a sudden. It is risky, you are dependent on outside factors, but look at the opportunity though, 40 to 65 million, that's a very nice sale. Next up, we've got the Garmer, staying pretty stable at a low point, I would say. Where are the buyers at? 48 million. I would say for that longer term investment, you could look into grabbing a couple of Garmers below 50 million. Makes a lot of sense to me. Then we've got the Succubus next, back on its average after actually a high point here. So 57 million for the sellers, 50 million for the buyers. And then finally the Worm, actually at a high point, 1 year high point at this point, quite interesting. Selling for 70 million, buyers at 65 million. Definitely one of the ships that you could try to sell if you happen to have a couple lying around. Very interesting pirate faction segment in my opinion, because of the mixed potentials out there. So you've got some high points, you've got some averages, and you've got some activities due to the events, and then you have probably a low point here for the Garmer all of a sudden, which is a bit surprising. I think it's a very cool ship. So I might even just buy one for myself just to take a look at it, maybe see what I can do with it. But then let's move on to the Navy faction frigates. Here, of course, what I'm interested in is to see the motions of these frigate prices, and that is generally tied to faction warfare activities. Here is the Kaldari Navy hook build a month ago, 1 year low point of 10 million, and look at us slowly go back up. Already 17 million. That would have been a very good trade a month ago. I should maybe really start to look at these a bit more often, because that was an opportunity that I would have spotted. This is so clearly, you know, May, April, an obvious buy opportunity at a 1 year low point, and look at it formalizing right now, increasing price again on presumably Galente fighting back a little bit more against the Caldari. The low prices should be basically super ubiquitous loyalty points, so that should mean the winning faction basically. So Caldari Navy Hookbill coming from a low point. Look at that trade potential here. It's definitely one of those things that you can make ISK in just by paying attention to that market and to what happens in faction warfare. It's something that I'm not doing actively enough, basically way too little is actually the right way to say it. It's such a good market. You can clearly see the potential here. Look at that, 15 million, 25 million, nice sale. Look at that decline to 10 million. We could have bought all the Caldari Navy Hookbills we wanted. Look at the volumes here, and then we are already going back up in price. That would have been such trade potential in the last year. It's pretty crazy. The Federation Navy Comet is a little bit the opposite, of course. Galente Federation, if Caldari is at a low point, then the Federation is going to be at a high point because their LP is abysmal. But know, of course, that since the Caldari Navy Hookbill is already going up in price, we can expect a drop off for the Federation Navy Comet pretty soon as well. So it's in a sell opportunity, and you can definitely still try to sell them now, and I would do so now rather than later, because we know that the momentum is going to switch back. But look at that opportunity. That's incredible. We could have bought these for 12.5 million throughout the year if we spotted that as a low point, and now almost double the price. These are currently selling for 24 million ISK. Imperial Navy Slicer at a low point, so that should be the Amar winning out at the moment. You can already see volume increases. Availability 12.7 million, 10.7 for the buyers. So yeah, definitely try to like grab a couple of for 11 million ISK. Makes a lot of sense. I'd say Imperial Navy Slicer is in a buy opportunity. And then what you need to wait for is Minmatar Faction Warfare to come back a little bit. And as expected, Republic Fleet Firetail at a high point here, selling for more than 15 million ISK in response. So the Crucifier is low as well. And then the Griffin is in that momentum, is working its way up after selling for a while for close to 10 million ISK. Molus, a bit less pronounced, but also obviously went up to 40 million ISK and is already going back down. So you can expect the Federation Navy Comet to drop off any moment now, basically, if you look at this chart and what's happening with the Caldari ones. And then finally we've got the Vigil as well, at a high point, 20 million, definitely want to sell. So right now it looks like you're selling Minmatar, you're selling Galente as much as you can, and you can still try to buy Amar and then hope that Minmatar Faction Warfare can make the comeback. This is actually such an interesting market. Perhaps I should consider adding that to the regular roster, but again, I am a little bit worried about time when it comes to that. Maybe it's something that we could do completely separately. Try to become a faction warfare trader and try to find a different way to cover that. We'll see what I can do with it, but I think you can see that here this is a market that is predictable. You've got this warfare reason, this gameplay reason that makes this market a bit more predictable, and you can make really good trades in it. So it's something quite unique compared to all the others, where the others are tied to the entire sandbox, and this is actually tied to a very specific activity where you can keep an eye on both of them. So very interesting. I should perhaps look for a way to add this in a different way and to look more closely at it, because every single time I do it I say, god damn, that's quite a missed opportunity. Look at that Caldari Navy Hookbill, 1 year low point, 10 million. That would have been so glaring that I would have definitely jumped on it, and we would already be making money on it right now. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this week though, guys. We'll see if I can work that in somehow. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all next time.